Hello, welcome back. So in the previous lesson, we learned about vectors, but what can you do with these vectors? So think back to elementary school. What did you guys learn about in math class? Well, probably you first started with counting, but then you started learning about adding. So let's talk about vector addition. So let's have a vector, let's say this is vector A, and say it's pointing to the right and has this length, and then let's say we have vector B pointing to the right, having this length. If we want to add these two vectors, they're both pointing to the right, and they have these lengths, it's pretty easy. A plus B would simply be the length of A, pointing to the right, plus the length of B, pointing to the right. So this is A, this is B, so this whole thing is just A plus B. So you don't need to listen to a YouTube lecture in order to learn that, probably. However, what happens if we have a vector A that's pointing, say, to the right, but then we have another vector B that's pointing in a different direction? So we know what to do with the lengths. The lengths have to stay the same, but how do we add these two vectors since they're pointing in different directions? Well, you can use this one rule. You can move vectors, but you have to keep the size. So here we have to keep this length the same and the direction the same. So you can move these vectors around because they're just floating in space right here. So it doesn't matter where they are on the page as long as they have the same length and the same direction. And when you add them together, we like to use this method called the head to tail method of vector addition. So this head to tail method, let's go to A. A has a head and a tail. This is the tail. This is the head. How about B? Where do you think the head and the tail are? This is the tail. This is the head. So you can move these vectors around, and you have to do head to tail. I'll use the head to tail method of vector addition. So here we've got vector A. It's approximately the same size as should be. Then B, we can move it over here next to A. It has to keep the same direction, but we have to have the tail, the head, and then the tail and the head. So the head to tail method is working. And finally, to get the final answer, because basically you want to have what happens when you add A plus B, you have to get something called the resultant. The resultant is just a fancy word for the result. So the result, I'm going to call it C. It's going to be the addition of vector A and vector B. And you get the resultant by going from the tail of A to the head of B. So this orange vector that I'm writing here is C. This is A plus B, and this is the resultant. Okay, hope this was helpful. See you next time.